Let's talk some chess. We've got a really exciting back and forth dynamic game to talk about today. This was a game played in 1893, so some time ago, 130 years ago, if my math is correct. And it's just the type of game where both players have a lot of great chances. There's a really exciting back and forth, and you don't know who's going to win until the final whistle blows, as it were. So let's get right into it. The player with the white pieces is named Charousek. The player with the black pieces is named Wollner. And Charousek with the white pieces starts off with e4. We have e5 by black, d4 by white. So the center game, probably a game you've seen many times in your own openings. And we just have black taking on d4, which obviously is a very common move. And here, instead of taking back with the queen to equalize material, white plays the Danish gambit, which is c3, inviting black to take another pawn, and now white will be down a pawn and ready to develop and expand in the center. And black accepts, takes the pawn on c3, so now white is down a pawn, but instead of taking back, first white plays this bishop to c4 move. The proper move, probably the most common move in this position, at least the one the engine recommends, is knight takes on c3. And now after black doesn't take black, puts the bishop on c5. Then you have bishop to c4 after d6. Now queen to b3, teaming up as a battery against the f7 pawn with the bishop. And this looks pretty scary because white has a bunch of pieces out and is eyeing this f7 pawn. But the proper move here to actually just totally derail the Danish gambit is to get very aggressive with the black pieces and play queen to h4, ignoring this threat on f7. And the idea is that while white does have this battery eyeing f7, black has a much more dangerous battery eyeing f2 because the queen can take on f2, and that's a much more dangerous check, of course. So here, white is forced to play queen to c2, a really slow defensive move to defend this f2 pawn, and now the attack and the gambit have sort of dissipated, and black has the advantage of being up a pawn and not having a positional disadvantage. So that's what happened. That's what to do if you see the Danish gambit in your games, but in this case, we don't even have to worry about that because we have bishop to c4 right off the bat. So here black plays knight to f6. This is a nice move, developing a piece and attacking this pawn on e4. And in this position, white plays knight to f3, which I don't get. Just take the pawn on b3 and protect this pawn on e4. But maybe maybe Charousek knows something we don't and plays knight to f3. And here black plays bishop to c5. Just getting another piece out. You can take with a pawn. You can take this, b3, b2 pawn, but then you get bishop takes on b2, and now you have these two fully operational bishops. So probably not something that Wollner wanted to go into, and instead plays bishop to c5. And here, finally, we have this knight to c3 move, capturing a pawn. We have d6 from black, opening up the light square bishop, and now both sides castle. So we just, very similar idea to many gambits where black is up a pawn, but white does have one more piece developed. Both sides have castled, so it's going to be a struggle to see who can get some advantage going, who can control the center, and maybe who can even start an attack. Sorry, my mouth is like super dry today. So white tries to start an attack. Instead of like positionally, slowly gaining an advantage, white plays the pretty aggressive knight to g5 move, which is a common move we see in these sorts of positions when your opponent castles kingside. Now you have the bishop and the knight eyeing this f7 pawn. And here black makes a very natural sort of responsive move, which is h6, trying to kick the knight away, force the knight to make a decision whether to continue onwards or to retreat. But this is actually a move that black sort of had a small advantage, and this totally just evaporates it. The proper move here is knight to c6, and the reason for that we will see in a moment, because we're going to see the attack that white gets out of this. So after h6, white plays knight takes on f7, and you don't want to be down a pawn. The knight is attacking the queen. You can't let the knight move away because then there will be a discovered check from the bishop, which is a theme we'll see later in this game. So remember that. So the only real move here is to take the knight with the rook on f7. But now you get this e5 move from white. And this is a really nice move because you can't take back with the d pawn because then queen takes queen is pretty good for white. So you obviously can't do that. This pawn is pinned, and your knight is under attack. And the reason why I mentioned before this knight to c6 move is the proper move in this position instead of h6 is because after knight takes, rook takes, and now e5. Now you just get knight takes on e5, and this is totally good this is just a way better position for black. So that's why you need to put the knight on c6, in addition to just having the benefit of another developed piece. But alas, black plays h6, and we go into this sort of attack. And here you have two choices, really, with the knight. You can bring the knight back to h7, which is recommended by the engine. So bring the knight back, and then bishop takes, king takes, and now just play defense with these pieces and try to withstand the attack. But what makes this game so good and so memorable is that black just decides to really go for it. And here plays knight to g4, eerily similar to that knight to g5 move we saw from white just a moment ago. The queen is attacking the knight, but it's protected by the bishop, and now the knight and the bishop are teaming up on the f2 pawn. The rook technically is also attacking this pawn, but the rook won't be. The rook is currently pinned and it won't be around for much longer, so you can ignore that. But powerful knight that's attacking these two pawns here. And now you have to be careful, right? Because there's a counterattack. You can't make the wrong move because you don't want to lose a ton of pieces or get checkmated. But here white finds a really nice move, a really natural move in this position, but a really important move that achieves two purposes. And that move is e6. And the obvious threat here is pawn takes rook on f7. But the other threat, which is kind of, I didn't even really notice it when I was looking at this game the first time, is that the pawn is blocking the bishop from guarding the knight on g4. So now the queen can take the knight, totally fine on g4. So this is sort of a fork from the pawn. One tong of the fork is an attack. The other tong is an obstacle to create a piece that is, now undefended. So both of these pieces are hanging, the rook and the knight. And again, you have to make a decision which one to save. And it really comes down to, do you want to play defense or do you want to play offense? And again, black says, I want to play offense. I want to get an attack going. I want to punch back and counter against this attack, and plays the super aggressive queen to h4, and we just have an awesome position. So the rook is totally hanging on f7, obviously, but more importantly, the knight and the queen are teaming up on h2, and if white makes some silly move here, then you just get queen takes on h2, and this, of course, is going to be checkmate. And in addition to that, you have the queen, knight, and bishop now eyeing f2, so just a lot of pressure on these king pawns, and you have to be very careful here. So first white plays, that's not what I want to show. First white plays the riskless pawn takes rook on f7. This comes with check, so obviously you don't have time to play this queen to h2 checkmate, and the king runs to f8. And now, give me one more second. Super dry mouth. Now black has to think of a way to continue attacking, and plays the very natural move. There are three pieces attacking this f2 pawn and only two pieces defending it, so the math checks out. Take the pawn, and that's what black does. Sorry, I forgot a crucial move in the position, so it's white's move. That's my fault. So it is white's move, and again, you have to watch out for this checkmate on h2. So white plays the really nice bishop to f4, which protects the h2 pawn. But this bishop to f2 move, it's a defensive move, but it also plants the seed for a future attack that will be very powerful in this game. So keep an eye on this bishop. Don't forget that it's here. Remember this move. And it also allows the rook to sort of swing over into the game. So a really nice move that achieves a bunch of different purposes. So now we have, like I was mentioning, knight takes on f2, and now you got to be really careful with the white pieces. The king can't move to h1 because the knight is defending, but as soon as the knight moves away, the bishop will check the king. This is a discovered check. We saw this similar thing on f7, but the issue here is that the knight is attacking the queen, and it doesn't look very good if you take with the rook. I haven't looked at this, but this certainly doesn't. Yeah, the problem with this, if you can't take with the rook like we saw on f7, because then rook takes, queen takes with check, king has to move, and now rook picks up the bishop, and now this this is not good for white. So you can't really take the knight, but the knight is also attacking your queen. So you have to make sure that you watch out for the discovered check, watch out for the queen. So here white just played queen to e2, and this achieves a couple of things. It gets the queen out of harm's way, but it also puts the queen on this very important not undefended, but open e-file. And now, just like black is threatening all sorts of discoveries and checkmates, white is threatening checkmate on e8. If the queen gets to e8 teams up with the pawn, then this is checkmate. So now you have to be very careful with the black pieces. And here black plays the riskless and kind of obvious knight to g4, so checking the king, discovered check from the bishop, and it doesn't make sense to block with any of these pieces, so white just retreats to h1. And now it's tough to find a way to continue the attack. So you can't take with the queen, of course, because then bishop takes, so that doesn't work. And here black plays the best move, which is bishop to d7. And this it looks like a slow move because it's not really attacking anything, but it defends this e8 square from queen to e8 checkmate. So it's an important move in the position. And you also have ideas of bringing the bishop to c8 or c6 and joining in on the attack, getting another attacker to this really, king, which is sort of running out of spaces to hide. So white has to act fast, and in this case, in this position, white plays rook a to e1, doubling up on the e file, and now adding even more pressure to this e8 square. So just really, trying to get this, this king stuck by just unsurpassable force on the e file. And now we have sort of the final move by black, the final sort of defensive move. There's not a move that works in this position. I think the engine recommends something else, but all moves don't really work, and you'll see why. Here black plays knight to c6, the move we talked about long ago. It shows up now. The idea behind knight to c6, yes, it gets a knight developed, but it also creates a defender to the e8 square. So the rook and the bishop are now defending e8, and just like we saw white swing a rook over to e1, now we see black basically opening up a defense of e8 with a rook. So looks like a very reasonable move, and it looks like black is properly defending the e8 square, but this is actually game over. Now there's just a crushing attack from white that you cannot stop. So pause the video, see if you can find the proper move here while I give you a moment. Okay, so there's nothing more demoralizing in chess than when you make a move to try to prevent your opponent from making a move, and then your opponent makes that move anyways. And that's exactly what happened here. Black tries to prevent queen to e8 by putting the knight on c6 and allowing the rook to defend e8. But here, white just plays queen to e8 check anyways, and not very fun to see. Always makes you feel like you've miscalculated. And in this case, we'll see how it ends. So the king can't obviously move anywhere. The queen is super protected, so you can't take the queen with the king. You're forced to accept the sacrifice, so black takes with the rook on e8. Doesn't matter if you take with the rook or the bishop. And here, the way to continue the attack is not with rook takes on f8. It's not with pawn turns into rook on f8, although sometimes I do that to try to be cool and get 3 rooks on the board. It is pawn takes with promotion to queen on e8. So very similar position, but now there's no rook on a8. Once again, you can't take the queen because the rook is defending, so you have to accept the sacrifice with the bishop on e8. And now it looks like it's okay for black, right? Like now black is up a queen, ton of material. Doesn't look like there's a way to continue this attack. There's actually a way to finish the attack, and that is with this bishop, which we mentioned. This bishop to f4 move set the seed for a great attack, and the great attack culminates now in the beautiful bishop to d6, and this is checkmate. The bishop is checking the king, and in fact, the two bishops look like they're doing all the work. This light squared bishop is cutting off this diagonal. This bishop is cutting off this diagonal, and the game is over. Now, I didn't deliver that, properly. What's really cool about this checkmate is that all of the pieces are working together. And you might be saying, well, this rook isn't doing anything, right? Because these two bishops are checkmating the king of their own accord. But what's important and what white had to see is that this pawn needs to be removed from the f-file because you need this rook active on the f-file. And the reason you need that rook active on the f-file is because this needs to be double check, or double checkmate as it were, from the bishop and the rook. Otherwise, if the rook was not checking the king here, then the pawn can just take the bishop on d6 and black is totally fine. For example, in this position before, this is the same idea, bishop takes on d6. Again, all these squares are taken away, but this is not checkmate because of pawn takes on d6. So white saw that it was important to remove this pawn from the f-file, so sack, and just one sack, and then bishop takes on d6, double check, king has to move, and a double check, the king has to move because you can't capture both pieces or block both pieces with one move. King has to move, there's nowhere to move, and that is game over. So just an awesome game. I mean, obviously, we see a lot of games where the losing side has like all the pieces on the back rank, haven't been developed, just awkward play. This is not so in this case. There are a lot of really active black pieces that are ready to attack. I mean, this The queen and the knight are threatening h2. The bishop is slicing this way. This bishop can join as well. So just a really awesome game with a lot of back and forth. And in this case, this beautiful checkmate was the one that came out on top. And don't forget how important this double checkmate was here to really finish the game in style. So thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Drop a like, drop a subscribe, and we'll see you next time.